What if I told you that everything you believe about wealth is a lie? We're taught to think that being rich means having a mansion, designer clothes, and the power to solve any problem with a checkbook. But the most powerful truths, the ones that truly change us, often come from the most unexpected places. This is a story that proves that sometimes the person living in a palace is the poorest one in the room. It's a story about what happens when a hired fiancé takes his wealthy boss home, and just one dinner in his humble 6-room shack completely silences the heiress. Meet Evelyn Bailey. On the surface, she has an endless fortune and a name that opens every door. But beneath that flawless exterior is a deep, hollow emptiness, a world of sterile silences and crushing family expectations. Desperate for a solution, she does what she does best: she buys one. Enter Vincent Wallace, a man from a world she can't even imagine. She hires him to be her fiancé, seeing him as a simple solution, a pawn in her game. She believes his modest background makes him easy to control. She couldn't be more wrong. Their arrangement is a secret, but the real plot twist is the emotional journey it ignites. This isn't just a love story, it's a story about overcoming our own prejudices. It's a raw look at the clash between rich versus poor and the surprising kindness that can bloom in the most unlikely circumstances. We're about to witness the moment Evelyn's perfectly curated world collides with a reality so genuine, so heart-aching, that it leaves her utterly speechless. She thought she was paying for a service, but she's about to receive a lesson that will force a moment of reckoning and just maybe a chance at redemption. So get ready for an emotional ride. We are so excited to share this story with you. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. We love to see how far our stories travel. And don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's next, and share this video with someone you think will be touched by this powerful story. You know, it's funny how life works. 1 minute you think you have it all figured out, holding the world in the palm of your hand, and the next, a single unexpected evening turns everything on its head. This is the story of Evelyn Bailey, an heiress who believed money could solve any problem, even the messy ones involving family pressure and appearances. She needed a fiancé fast, and for her, the solution wasn't a matter of the heart, but a simple transaction. A hired fiancé was, in her mind, just another business deal. This is where Vincent Wallace steps in, a man whose world couldn't be more different from Evelyn's. He wasn't some desperate actor or a con man looking for a payday. He had his own quiet reasons, a secret motivation that made him agree to this charade. The stark contrast between them was almost comical, quintessential rich versus poor narrative. But with a twist no one saw coming. Evelyn saw him as a pawn in her game, a temporary fix, never imagining the emotional journey she was about to embark upon. The plan was simple on paper: a contract, a set of rules, and a handsome payment for his time. Evelyn felt a smug sense of control, believing she had orchestrated the perfect arrangement to silence her family's incessant questions. She looked at Vincent, with his calloused hands and unassuming smile, and felt a pang of something she mistook for pity. Little did she know, this arrangement would lead to a profound moment of overcoming her own prejudices, a truly heart-aching turn of events that she couldn't foresee. To maintain the illusion, a dinner with his family was proposed. Evelyn internally scoffed at the idea. What could she possibly gain from spending an evening in what she imagined to be a rundown shack? The thought of it almost made her feel humiliated. In advance, but for the sake of the plot, she agreed. It was a necessary evil to sell their manufactured love story. She braced herself for an evening of awkwardness and simple-minded conversation, a small price to pay for her ultimate freedom. The drive there was filled with a thick tension, one of those heavy silences that says more than words ever could. Evelyn rehearsed her lines, her backstory, her reasons for falling for a man like Vincent. She was the director of this play, and he was her leading man. Or so she thought. She was completely unprepared for the genuine kindness that was about to greet her, a warmth so authentic it would shatter her carefully constructed defenses and plant the first seed of a surprising redemption. As they pulled up to his home, a place of humble yet undeniable warmth, Evelyn felt the first crack in her cynical armor. The house wasn't a palace, true, but it radiated a life her own mansion sorely lacked. This single dinner, this one reluctant step into his world, was destined to be the ultimate plot twist. She thought she was going there to fool his family, but in a strange turn of fate, the person who would be most fooled, most changed, was herself, leaving her utterly speechless. Let's be real, desperation makes people do crazy things. For the wealthy heiress Evelyn Bailey, that desperation had a name: her family. They were a force of nature, with expectations as high as their bank accounts, and their latest demand was for her to settle down. The pressure was immense, a constant weight on her shoulders. So she did what she always did when faced with a problem: threw money at it. Her solution was a hired fiancé, a seemingly perfect way to get them off her back. She chose Vincent Wallace specifically because he seemed manageable. He had a quiet demeanor and a life story that didn't scream ambition or complication. In the grand, often brutal chess game of the rich versus poor, Evelyn felt she had just captured a key piece. She saw him not as a person, but as a project, a temporary employee who would follow her script to the letter. This belief gave her a false sense of security, a feeling that she was the one pulling all the strings in this elaborate puppet show. Oh, the irony. She thought his simple background made him predictable, easy to mold into the role she required. For her fabricated love story, she drafted a contract full of clauses and conditions, outlining every detail of their public appearances. It was a business arrangement, clean and simple, designed to protect her assets and her heart from any unforeseen attachments. Evelyn Bailey was, above all else, a woman who despised messy, emotional entanglements, and she was determined to keep this one sterile. The thought of being publicly humiliated by a disastrous courtship was her greatest fear, far greater than being alone. By hiring Vincent, she believed she was mitigating that risk entirely. She could coach him, dress him, and present him as the perfect partner, all without the genuine mésalliances of a real relationship. It was a brilliant plan, or so she told herself, as she ignored the small nagging voice in her head that whispered about the hollowness of it all. A secret pact for a public display. She handed him the first check with a condescending smile, a gesture that was meant to establish the power dynamic between them from the get-go. She was the employer, he was the employee. Their worlds were orbits apart, and she intended to keep it that way. Vincent, for his part, simply took the check with a nod, his expression unreadable. This lack of an overtly grateful reaction was the first tiny detail that didn't quite fit into Evelyn's perfect, controllable plan. But for now she was content. She had her solution, her ticket to freedom from her family's prying eyes. She had her hired fiancé and a schedule to keep. The first major performance on their calendar was fast approaching: a weekend with his family. Evelyn viewed it as a necessary hurdle, a tiresome but essential step in her grand deception, completely unaware of the plot twist that awaited her. She was walking into the lion's den, only to find it was a place of unexpected warmth. Now let's flip the coin and look at this from Vincent's perspective, because every story has two sides, doesn't it? He wasn't blind. He saw the condescension in Evelyn Bailey's eyes every time she looked at him. He heard the subtle disdain in her voice when she spoke of his life. But here's the thing about Vincent: he was unbothered. Her judgment rolled off him like water off a duck's back. He had a deeper purpose, a secret reason for accepting this bizarre offer from the world of the rich. This wasn't about the money, not really. Well, not in the way Evelyn assumed. The payment was a means to an end, a tool he desperately needed for a situation far more important than her family drama. This hired fiancé gig was a strange, unexpected lifeline. So he endured her patronizing attitude and her clinical approach to their relationship with a quiet grace. He was playing a long game, one whose rules Evelyn couldn't even begin to comprehend. This was his own story of overcoming an obstacle. His silence was not weakness, it was strength. While Evelyn was busy building walls, Vincent was looking right through them, seeing the scared, lonely woman hiding behind the heiress facade. He recognized a deep-seated unhappiness in her, something that all her money couldn't fix. He felt a flicker of something akin to sympathy, a testament to his innate kindness. He knew this experience would be a challenge, but he also sensed it held the potential for something more. He let her believe she was in control, that her wealth gave her the upper hand. He played the part of the simple man, nodding along to her instructions, because it served his purpose. His focus was on the end goal, the reason he was willing to put himself in this strange, slightly humiliating position. Every condescending remark, every impatient sigh from Evelyn was just noise. He was centered, his resolve firm, driven by a love and loyalty she couldn't yet understand. It was the ultimate plot twist brewing beneath the surface. He knew the visit to his family would be the real testnet for him, but for her. He wasn't worried about his family judging her, he was curious to see how she would react to them. How would this woman, who lived in a sterile mansion, handle a home filled with laughter, chaos, and genuine connection? He almost looked forward to the surprise on her face. He suspected that her carefully constructed world was about to be shaken to its core. And so he agreed to her terms, signed her cold contract, and prepared to introduce his fake fiancée to his very real family. He wasn't her pawn, but a player in his own right, with his own secret agenda. He saw this not as a mere acting job, but as a path to a necessary redemption for his own family situation. He was ready to let her see the truth, not about their fake relationship, but about what truly matters in life. For any fake relationship to work, it needs a dose of authenticity, a sprinkle of truth to sell the lie. Evelyn knew this, even if she hated it. The next logical step in their charade, as proposed by Vincent, was a weekend visit to his family. Her immediate reaction was a visceral no. The very idea felt like a chore of epic proportions, an emotional burden she had no interest in carrying. A whole weekend? She could barely stand a few hours with her own family. She pictured a tiny, cluttered house, what her mind uncharitably labeled a shack, filled with people who would either fawn over her money or look at her with suspicion. She imagined forced conversations, bad food, and an overwhelming sense of awkwardness. The thought of it was genuinely dreadful, a scenario where she would feel exposed and, in a way, humiliated by the sheer simplicity of it all. It was a stark reminder of the rich versus poor divide that defined their arrangement. But Vincent was gently insistent, explaining that it was the only way to make their love story believable to anyone who might be watching, especially her own suspicious family. "It's just one weekend," he had said, his voice calm and reasonable, which only irritated her more. Reluctantly, with a heavy sigh that conveyed her immense displeasure, she agreed. It was a strategic move, a sacrifice for the greater goal of silencing her parents. She would endure it. She packed a small, expensive bag, choosing outfits that were deliberately understated, though they still cost more than his car. She was preparing for a performance after all, and her costume had to be perfect. She was the gracious, down-to-earth girlfriend, a role she found both ridiculous and demeaning. This whole charade was beginning to feel less like a brilliant plan and more like a series of increasingly unpleasant tasks she had to complete for her own overcoming. The entire drive was cloaked in one of their characteristic silences, but this time it was different. It wasn't just unspoken tension, it was thick with Evelyn's dread and Vincent's quiet anticipation. She stared out the window, watching her pristine City life receded in the rearview mirror, replaced by humbler landscapes. Each mile brought a growing sense of anxiety, a feeling that she was traveling to a foreign country with no understanding of the local customs. She had no idea how right she was. She was bracing for a dreadful weekend, a box to be ticked on her hired fiancé to-do list. What she couldn't possibly anticipate was the immense surprise that awaited her. She was expecting to be the one observing and judging, but she was about to become the one being observed with a disarming kindness, and the judgments that would crumble would be her own. The stage was set for a life-altering experience. The moment they pulled into the driveway, Evelyn's worst fears seemed to materialize right before her eyes. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't even a respectable suburban house by her standards. It was a small, simple 6-room home, immaculately clean and clearly cared for. But to her, it was nothing short of a shack. The word echoed in her mind, a cruel and instant judgment she couldn't suppress. This was where he lived. This was his world. A wave of something cold and sharp washed over her, a feeling she could only identify as being utterly humiliated. How could she, Evelyn Bailey, the heiress to a fortune, be standing in front of this place, pretending it was part of her life? The contrast between her sprawling, empty mansion and this cozy but modest home was a physical blow. The whole rich versus poor dynamic wasn't an abstract concept anymore. It was the peeling paint on the porch railing and the old car in the driveway. She remained frozen in the car for a moment, her knuckles white as she gripped her designer handbag. This had to be a mistake. She shot a look at Vincent, a silent accusation in her eyes, as if he had deliberately misled her. But he was already getting out of the car, a genuine, relaxed smile on his face. He looked at his home not with shame, but with an unmistakable affection that completely baffled her. This was not a shack to him, this was home. For a terrifying second, she considered telling him to turn the car around, to call the whole thing off. The contract wasn't worth this feeling of deep, internal mortification. This was not part of the deal she had envisioned. Her carefully constructed facade of a perfect love story felt like it was about to shatter before it even began. This was supposed to be a step in her journey of overcoming her family, not a plunge into a world she found so appallingly simple. But then the front door opened, and the first members of his family stepped out onto the porch, their faces bright with welcoming smiles. There was no turning back now. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn pasted on her most practiced, charming smile, a mask to hide her inner turmoil. She stepped out of the car, her expensive heels sinking slightly into the soft grass of the lawn, feeling like an alien stepping onto a new planet, a planet she already despised. The initial shock was a visceral, physical reaction, a testament to the gilded cage she had lived in her entire life. She was horrified, yes, but beneath that horror was a seed of unwilling curiosity. The sheer surprise of the situation was disorienting. She had come prepared for a weekend of awkwardness, but she hadn't prepared for her own snobbery to hit her with such force. The real test wasn't just beginning for her charade, but for her very soul. Evelyn braced herself for one of two reactions. Either they would be starstruck by the presence of a wealthy heiress, fawning over her in a way she found deeply irritating, or they would be cold and suspicious, viewing her as an intruder from a different world. She was prepared for both scenarios, armed with polite deflections and a cool demeanor. What she wasn't prepared for was the third, unexpected option, genuine, unadulterated warmth. There was no awe, only welcome. Vincent's mother, a woman with kind eyes and a smile that reached them, pulled her into a gentle hug before Evelyn could even extend a formal handshake. "We're so happy to finally meet you, dear," she said, and the sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. It wasn't a greeting for a potential source of wealth or status, it was a greeting for the woman her son had brought home. This simple act of kindness was the first real surprise of the evening, and it left Evelyn momentarily speechless. His father shook her hand firmly, his gaze direct and friendly, and his younger siblings buzzed around with an energy that was both chaotic and infectious. They didn't ask about her work, her family's name, or the car she arrived in. They asked if she was hungry from the drive, if she wanted a drink, if she was comfortable. This barrage of simple human concern was so foreign to her cynical worldview that she didn't know how to respond. It was a heart-aching welcome she didn't feel she deserved. In her world, every interaction was a transaction, every greeting a subtle negotiation for power or position. The silences in her family dinners were filled with unspoken judgments. Here, the air was filled with laughter and easy chatter. It was confusing. She was the one with the secret, the one playing a part in a fake love story. Yet they were treating her with a level of acceptance she had never received from her own blood relatives. She found herself being led into the very shack she had just been internally mocking. And inside, it was not cluttered or dirty, but cozy and filled with the smell of a home-cooked meal. Photos of a happy, smiling family adorned every wall, a stark contrast to the professionally curated art in her own home. This wasn't the backdrop for a tragedy of the working class, it was the setting for a life rich in ways she was just beginning to perceive. The plot twist wasn't just about the house. It was about the people in it. Evelyn, the woman who could command boardrooms and silence critics with a single glance, felt her carefully constructed defenses begin to waver. Their genuine warmth was more disarming than any business tactic she had ever faced. It didn't fit. Her narrative of the rich versus poor dynamic where she was superior. Here, in this small, love-filled home, she felt an unfamiliar pang of something she couldn't quite name. It felt a lot like being on the outside looking in. The kitchen was the heart of the home, a whirlwind of joyful chaos. Evelyn, feeling entirely out of place, stood awkwardly in the doorway, a silent observer to a scene she might as well have been watching in a movie. Vincent and his siblings moved around each other with an effortless choreography, chopping vegetables, stirring pots, and stealing tastes from spoons. They weren't just preparing a meal, they were sharing a moment, their easy banter and laughter echoing off the warm yellow walls. She couldn't help but draw a stark, painful contrast to her own family. Meals, dinners at the Bailey estate were formal, sterile affairs. They were served by staff in a dining room so large you had to raise your voice to be heard across the table. The only sounds were the clinking of silverware on porcelain and the strained, polite conversation. The deafening silences between topics were a well-known language in her house, speaking volumes of unspoken resentments and unmet expectations. Here, there were no silences, only the comfortable, overlapping sounds of a family truly enjoying each other's company. They argued playfully over how much garlic to add. They teased their younger sister about her new crush, and they shared stories from their week. It was messy, it was loud, and it was alive. It was everything her life wasn't. This wasn't a performance. For her benefit, this was their reality, an emotional tapestry woven from small, everyday interactions. Watching Vincent in this element was a revelation. He wasn't the quiet, unassuming man she had hired. Here, he was a beloved son and a cherished older brother, his face relaxed and animated. He moved with a quiet confidence, a natural leader in this small, loving tribe. For the first time, she saw a glimpse of the real Vincent Wallace, a man of depth and warmth, and it was a jarring departure from the simple character she had cast in her fake love story. The scene stirred a profound sense of emptiness inside her, a feeling she usually kept buried under layers of work, shopping, and social obligations. The glaring disparity of the rich versus poor narrative was suddenly inverted. They had so little, in terms of material wealth, yet their lives seemed infinitely richer than hers. She possessed everything one could buy, but she had never experienced this kind of effortless joy, this sense of belonging. She felt a strange, unfamiliar longing to be a part of it, to trade her lonely, gilded cage for a seat at this crowded, noisy table. The thought was so absurd, so contrary to everything she believed about herself, that she quickly pushed it away. But the image remained, seared into her memory, a family working together, laughing together, being together. It was a simple, heart-aching portrait of happiness, and it made her feel poorer than she ever had in her life. Old habits die hard, don't they? The feelings of warmth and longing that had begun to stir in Evelyn were quickly smothered by her more familiar defense mechanism, sarcasm. Overwhelmed and feeling out of her depth, she reverted to type. As Vincent's mother offered her a second helping of stew, Evelyn made a remark, a snide comment disguised as a polite observation. "It's charming," she said. "How you all manage to be so happy with so little." The words hung in the air, instantly chilling the warm atmosphere. The laughter subsided. For a moment, a flicker of hurt crossed his mother's face, and Evelyn felt a sharp, unfamiliar pang of guilt. She had intended to re-establish her superiority, to put a little distance between her world and theirs, but instead, she just felt cruel. She had, in a single sentence, made them feel less than, and the feeling of being humiliated was now theirs, not hers. It was a low blow, even for her, and she immediately wished she could take it back. Before anyone else could react, Vincent spoke, his voice calm and steady, devoid of anger. He looked directly at Evelyn, but his words were for everyone at the table. "We're not happy with so little, Evelyn," he said gently. "We're happy because we have what matters." He gestured around the table at his family. This is wealth. It's just not the kind you can count in a bank account." The quiet authority in his voice was undeniable. It wasn't a scolding, but a simple statement of fact, a defense of his family's values. He didn't raise his voice or get emotional, which somehow made his words hit even harder. He was demonstrating a masterclass in overcoming her prejudice with grace. He defended their life in the so-called shack not with excuses, but with a profound sense of pride. The core of the rich versus poor debate was laid bare, and Evelyn was on the losing side. His family looked at him with admiration, their brief moment of hurt replaced by a quiet pride. They didn't need to say anything, Vincent had said it all. The genuine kindness in his approach, even when defending against her insult, was another small surprise that chipped away at her armor. He hadn't shamed her, he had simply illuminated a truth she had never been taught, a truth her vast fortune had managed to obscure. Evelyn could only nod, her throat suddenly tight. She had tried to create distance, but all she had done was expose her own poverty of spirit. The silences that followed were not awkward, but contemplative. She had been expertly and gently put in her place, not with aggression, but with a simple, powerful declaration of love and contentment. It was a lesson she would not soon forget. Later in the evening, as the dinner plates were being cleared, the atmosphere softened again, the small ripple from Evelyn's comment smoothed over by the family's resilient warmth. It was Vincent's youngest sister, Sarah, who unknowingly delivered the next blow to Evelyn's preconceived notions. She began to speak, her voice filled with a youthful earnestness, telling a story about her older brother that was clearly a piece of treasured family lore. It was a secret history Evelyn was now privy to. "You know," Sarah began, looking at Evelyn, "when our dad got sick a few years ago, Vincent was the one who held us all together." She described how Vincent, without a word of complaint, had quietly dropped out of a prestigious university program he loved, one that had promised him a brilliant future, to come home. He took on extra work, ensuring his siblings could stay in school and that their father's medical bills were paid. It was a story of quiet, profound sacrifice. Evelyn listened, completely captivated. The man she had hired, the one she saw as simple and unambitious, had given up his own dreams for the sake of his family. It was a deeply emotional and heart-aching revelation. This wasn't just a man who lived a modest life. He was a man who had chosen it, a man who had sacrificed personal glory for the well-being of those he loved. The quiet depth of his character was something she had never, ever suspected. This was the ultimate plot twist. The money he was earning as her hired fiancé suddenly made sense in a completely new context. It wasn't for frivolous things. She imagined it was to pay off lingering debts, or perhaps to help Sarah with her own college tuition. His secret reason for taking the job wasn't about greed, it was about love. It was about a quiet, ongoing act of redemption, ensuring his family never had to suffer. The surprise of it all left her reeling. She looked over at Vincent, who was listening to his sister with a slightly embarrassed but gentle smile. He met Evelyn's gaze for a fleeting moment, and in his eyes she saw no regret, only a quiet resolve. She had judged him so harshly, seen him as a simple pawn in her game, a clear example of the rich versus poor divide. But the truth was, he was richer in character than anyone she had ever known. She felt a wave of shame wash over her, so potent it was almost dizzying. Her problems, which had seemed so monumental, family pressure, the need to maintain appearance, felt laughably trivial in comparison to the real-world sacrifices Vincent had made. He hadn't just given up a dream, he had shouldered a burden. With a silent strength that was both humbling and incredibly attractive. The weight of Sarah's story settled upon Evelyn, mingling with the unfamiliar warmth of the evening. It created a potent emotional cocktail inside her, a mixture of shame, admiration, and a strange, burgeoning sense of connection. As Vincent's mother and sister started clearing the table, something shifted in Evelyn. For the first time all night, she wasn't thinking about her performance as the loving girlfriend or the heiress out of her element. She was just there. Without a conscious thought, she stood up and began gathering plates. The action was so automatic, so foreign to her current life, that it felt like an out-of-body experience. The last time she had cleared a table, let alone washed a dish, was years ago, back before her family's wealth had ballooned into an empire, before staff became a permanent fixture in her life. The simple act felt like a step toward overcoming a version of herself she was beginning to dislike. Vincent's mother looked at her with a gentle surprise, but didn't say anything, simply handing her a stack of plates with a grateful smile. Evelyn followed them into the kitchen, the very room that had seemed so intimidating just an hour before. She stood at the sink, side by side with Sarah, and began to wash. The warm, soapy water on her hands was a grounding sensation, a simple, real feeling in a life that was often anything but. This was her first, small step toward redemption. It wasn't a grand gesture, but a quiet, humble act. Helping with the dishes was a chore she hadn't done in years, a task far beneath the station of Evelyn Bailey. Yet, in that moment, it felt more meaningful than any business deal she had ever closed. She was, for a brief, shining moment, not the employer or the fake fiancé, but just a part of the group, sharing in a simple domestic task. Vincent stood in the doorway, watching her, a soft, unreadable expression on his face. He saw the guard she held so tightly finally beginning to crumble. He saw the surprise in her own eyes as she scrubbed at a plate, as if she couldn't believe she was doing it either. He didn't comment or draw attention to it, allowing her the space to have this moment, to take this small step into his world on her own terms. The easy chatter of the family continued around her, but now she didn't feel like an outsider. She was a participant, however small her role. The clatter of dishes, the splash of water, the shared laughter, it was a symphony of belonging. The plot twist of the evening wasn't a dramatic event, but this quiet, internal shift. The heiress was washing dishes in a home shed called a shack, and for the first time, she was starting to feel like she was exactly where she needed to be. Vincent had been watching her all evening, a silent observer of her silent transformation. He saw her initial horror at his home, the snide comment born of insecurity, and the profound shock when she learned of his past sacrifices. But now, seeing her at the sink, her expensive sleeves rolled up, her brow furrowed in concentration as she washed a dish, he saw something else entirely. He saw a crack in the armor of the heiress. It was a moment of pure, unguarded vulnerability. Later, when the kitchen was clean and the family had settled in the living room with cups of tea, Vincent found a moment to speak with her alone on the back porch. The air was cool and crisp. For the first time since their arrangement began, he didn't see her as his employer or as the role she was playing. He saw just Evelyn. He decided to take a risk, to share a piece of himself that he rarely showed to anyone, a secret dream. "I know what my sister said," he began quietly, leaning against the railing beside her. "About university. I don't regret it, but I do still dream about it." He then shared his personal dream with her to one day finish his degree and open a small architectural firm that designed affordable, sustainable housing. He spoke of communities, not just buildings, of creating spaces where families like his could thrive. It was a dream born of kindness and experience. It was the first time he had spoken to her as an equal, as a confidant. He wasn't the hired fiancé or the simple man from a different world. He was a man with passions, ambitions, and a vision for the future. The simple, emotional way he described his dream was captivating. He wasn't seeking her approval or her money to fund it, he was simply sharing it, a gesture of trust that broke through another layer of her defenses. Evelyn listened, completely enthralled. Her world was full of men who talked about mergers, acquisitions, and hostile takeovers. Vincent spoke about building homes for people. The contrast was staggering. Their fake love story had suddenly been injected with a dose of profound reality. She realized he wasn't just overcoming financial hardship, he was actively trying to build a better world, starting with his own community. The gesture was not lost on her. He was treating her not as a client, but as a person whose opinion he might actually value. It was a subtle shift, but it changed everything. In that quiet moment on the porch, under the soft glow of a single light, the lines between their roles blurred. He had seen a flicker of the real her, and in return, he had shown her a piece of the real him. It was a quiet, heart-aching exchange that felt more genuine than anything in their contract. As Evelyn stood on that back porch, the sound of his family's laughter drifting out from the living room, a powerful and unsettling comparison took root in her mind. She pictured her own home, the sprawling Bailey mansion. It was a masterpiece of architecture, a testament to her family's wealth, featured in magazines, but it was also a place of deep, sterile silences. A house, not a home. A museum of a life, not a place where life was actually lived. The joyful chaos inside Vincent's house with overlapping conversations, the playful arguments, the easy affection was a universe away from her reality. She thought of the long, polished hallways of her mansion, where footsteps echoed and voices were kept low. The silences there weren't peaceful, they were heavy, filled with unspoken rules and expectations. The emptiness she felt wasn't just physical. Due to the sheer size of the space, it was a profound emotional void. This little house, this place she had so cruelly dismissed as a shack, was pulsating with an energy her mansion had never known. It was the energy of connection, of shared history, of unconditional love. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The entire rich versus poor narrative she had clung to was a lie. She was the one living in poverty, a poverty of the soul. She, the powerful heiress, felt an acute sense of envy for this life she had once looked down upon. What was the point of having a dozen sitting rooms if you had no one to sit and laugh with? What was the value of a priceless vase when there was no handmade card from a child to put next to it? Her life was a collection of beautiful, empty things. This truth, this sudden stark clarity, was its own form of surprise. This was the real plot twist of her life. She had hired a man to create a fake story of love, only to have him expose the complete lack of love in her real one. The contract, the money, the entire charade seemed absurd now. She wasn't just acting a part for her family, she had been acting a part for herself her entire life, pretending that her gilded cage was a paradise. The feeling of emptiness was overwhelming, a hollow ache in her chest. For the first time, she didn't try to push it away or bury it under a frivolous purchase. She let herself feel it, let the uncomfortable truth wash over her. Standing there, next to the hired fiancé who was proving to be more of a man than anyone she'd ever met, Evelyn Bailey began the painful process of overcoming her own illusions. She was finally waking up. As the evening began to wind down, just as Evelyn thought her heart couldn't possibly be more stirred, another moment of unexpected grace occurred. Vincent's mother, whose name she now knew was Maria, approached her with a small, clumsily wrapped package. "This is for you," she said, her voice soft. "It's not much, but I wanted you to have it." Evelyn was taken aback. A gift? For her, the surprise of it left her momentarily speechless. She carefully unwrapped the paper to reveal a simple, handmade scarf, knitted with soft, multicolored yarn. It was imperfect, with a few uneven stitches here and there, but it was beautiful and clearly made with care. It was the most heartaching gift she had ever received. It wasn't a diamond bracelet or a designer bag, it was something far more precious. It was a piece of someone's time, their effort, their warmth. But it was Maria's next words that truly broke through Evelyn's final defenses. She placed a gentle hand on Evelyn's arm and looked her straight in the eye. "People will see your name and your family's money," she said softly. "But I don't see that. I see a kindness in your eyes, Evelyn. It's a little hidden, a little scared, maybe. But it's there, and that's something money can't ever buy." The word struck Evelyn with the force of a tidal wave. Kindness? No one had ever accused her of that. She was known for being sharp, ruthless, efficient. But kind? The observation, so simple and so sincere, unleashed a powerful emotional surge. Her eyes welled up with tears, and for the first time in years, she felt the hot sting of crying in front of someone other than herself. She was so close to breaking down completely. This act of pure, unadulterated acceptance was the final step in her redemption. Maria hadn't just given her a scarf, she had given her a reflection of herself that she had never seen, or perhaps had refused to see. She saw past the heiress, past the snobbery, past the defensive walls, and saw a flicker of good. It was a gift of perception, of grace, that felt like a pardon for all her past sins of judgment. Evelyn could only whisper a thank you, her voice thick with unshed tears. She clutched the scarf in her hands as if it were a lifeline. This simple handmade object and the profound words that came with it meant more to her than her entire inheritance. It was a symbol of a different kind of wealth, a different way of seeing the world. And in that moment, she knew, with absolute certainty, that her life would never be the same. Holding the warm, knitted scarf in her hands, a profound realization dawned on Evelyn, as clear and bright as a sunrise after a long night. The contract, the meticulously drafted document that was supposed to govern this entire affair, was now meaningless. The check she had written, the money she had used as a tool of control, felt like a cheap and tawdry insult. None of it mattered anymore. The very foundation of their arrangement had crumbled into dust. She looked across the room at Vincent, who was laughing at a story his father was telling. She wasn't looking at her employee, the hired fiancé had purchased for a season. She was looking at a man of incredible character, of quiet strength and deep integrity. She was falling for him. It wasn't a gradual slide or a gentle descent, it was a sudden breathtaking plunge. This was the biggest plot twist of all, and it was happening inside her own heart. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. This wasn't supposed to happen. Her plan was designed to avoid this very outcome, to keep her heart safe and untouched. But she had failed spectacularly. She had set out to create a fake love story, only to stumble into the beginning of a real one. The irony was so thick she could taste it. She was overcoming her own carefully laid plans. She wasn't just falling for Vincent the man, but for the genuine life he represented. A life where family came first, where wealth was measured in laughter and love, and where sacrifices were made without a second thought. It was a life of substance, of meaning. It made her own existence, with its galas and board meetings, seem like a hollow painted facade. This was a redemption she hadn't known she was seeking. The power dynamic had completely inverted. She had started this journey believing she held all the cards, that her position as the heiress made her superior. Now she felt like a novice, a student learning a lesson of profound importance from a master. He had something she desperately wanted, something her fortune could never purchase: genuine, unpretentious happiness. The rich versus poor narrative had been a sham all along. The secret she now held was far more significant than their business arrangement. It was the secret of her own burgeoning feelings, a tender, fragile thing she didn't know how to handle. All she knew was that standing in that living room, surrounded by his family, she felt more at home than she ever had in her own mansion. The transaction was over. Something real and emotional had taken its place. The rest of the evening passed in a warm, comfortable blur. The family returned to the table, this time for dessert and coffee, and the storytelling continued. They spoke of childhood misadventures, of holidays spent together, of challenges they had faced and overcome as a unit. Each story was a thread in the rich, vibrant tapestry of their lives, woven together with love and resilience. And Evelyn, for the first time, was not an observer, but a listener. She sat in quiet awe, her cup of coffee untouched, simply absorbing the atmosphere. The snide, judgmental voice in her head, the one that had called this home a shack and its inhabitants simple, had gone completely silent. In its place was a profound respect. Her previous prejudices, the ones she had worn like expensive armor, were melting away, unable to survive in the intense heat of this family's warmth. This was a true experience of overcoming the heavy silences she was so accustomed to in her own home were an alien concept here. The air was filled with sound, with life, with connection. She looked from face to face: Maria's gentle smile, her husband's hearty laugh, Sarah's bright eyes, and saw nothing but beauty. The genuine kindness they showed each other, and had so freely extended to her, was a powerful antidote to the cynicism that had poisoned her for years. This was the most heart-aching scene she had ever witnessed. It was better than any play, more moving than any symphony. It was real. The rich versus poor framework through which she viewed the world now seemed like a childish, simplistic cartoon. Wealth, she was finally beginning to understand, had absolutely nothing to do with the numbers in a bank account. It had to do with the number of people who would miss you if you were gone. She felt a sense of redemption, not just for her earlier comment, but for her entire way of life. It was as if her eyes were being opened for the very first time, and the world looked different, sharper, more colorful, more meaningful. The surprise was that she wasn't disgusted or bored by this simplicity. She was captivated by it. She craved it. She glanced at Vincent, who caught her eye and gave her a small, knowing smile. He saw the change in her. He saw the awe in her expression. The wall between the heiress and the hired fiancé had completely dissolved. In that moment, they weren't roles anymore. They were just a man and a woman, sitting at a table, surrounded by family, on the cusp of something new and terrifyingly real. The evening finally came to a close. The stories wound down, the yawns began, and the comfortable rhythm of a family preparing for rest filled the house. Throughout it all, Evelyn remained in her state of quiet awe. The constant chatter in her mind, the planning, the judging, the calculating, it had all ceased. She was finally truly silenced. Not by intimidation or fear, but by the profound richness of the love and connection she had witnessed. It was a wealth so immense it left no room for words. She understood now. The entire premise of her arrangement with Vincent was built on a lie, but not the one she had created. The lie was her belief that she was the one with power, the one who was rich. As she looked at Vincent, seeing him say goodnight to his mother with a gentle kiss on the cheek, she saw him with brand new eyes. He wasn't the poor one in their arrangement, she was. She was the one impoverished in all the ways that truly mattered. The heiress was a pauper. This was the final, earth-shattering plot twist. The journey of overcoming her prejudices had led her to this single humbling truth. Her sprawling, empty mansion was the real shack. Her life of solitary luxury was the real hardship. The silences in her life were not peaceful. They were a symptom of a deep, spiritual poverty. This realization was both devastating and liberating, a moment of painful clarity that offered a chance at redemption. Later, when they were alone again for a moment before turning in for the night, the silence between them was different. It wasn't awkward or tense, it was filled with unspoken understanding. She looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest, all her defenses gone, leaving her raw and vulnerable. She had to know. She had to ask. The secret of her feelings could no longer be kept. "Vincent," she began, her voice barely a whisper, so different from her usual commanding tone. She looked into his eyes, hoping he could see the truth and sincerity in hers. "This arrangement, our contract," she took a shaky breath, summoning all her courage. The hired fiancé standing before her was the only man she had ever truly respected. The only one she could imagine building a real life with. She finally asked the question that would change everything. The question born from a single transformative evening. "Can this be real?" The words hung in the air between them, a fragile, hopeful bridge between two vastly different worlds. Her carefully constructed fake love story had led her to a desperate, heartfelt plea for a real one. The powerful Evelyn Bailey was, for the first time in her life, asking for something money couldn't buy. And so, Evelyn's journey comes to a close. But it's also a brand new beginning. What an incredible transformation, right? We saw an heiress who thought she had the world at her feet discover that her entire definition of wealth was built on sand. One single evening, one moment of genuine human connection, was all it took to shatter her illusions. It's a powerful reminder that the richest person isn't the one with the most money, but the one with the most love to give and receive. Vincent and his family didn't have much, but they had everything. This story was a truly emotional ride, from feeling the sting of being humiliated to the warmth of unexpected kindness, and finally to that beautiful moment of redemption. It's a classic tale of rich versus poor, but with a heart-aching twist that reveals the truth about what it means to be truly wealthy. Evelyn's journey of overcoming her own prejudices shows that it's never too late to open your eyes and your heart. We would love to hear what you think. What part of this story impacted you the most? Was it when Vincent's sister revealed his secret? Sacrifice? Or that beautiful moment when his mother gave Evelyn the handmade scarf? Please share your favorite moments in the comments below. We also want to know, did you expect the story to end this way? Or were you hoping for a different kind of plot twist? We read every single comment. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a huge thumbs up. It really helps our channel grow. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. We have plenty of older videos just like this one for you to explore. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and we can't wait to see you in the next video.